Hey y'all! In this video, I'm going to get into probably the most popular question I've been getting over the past year, and that is the difference between setting your Z0 position to the material surface or the machine bed. Now, even though I'm using Aspire version 11.5, this is true for all of the Vectric software titles. In order to demonstrate this, I'm going to go into a file that I've created over here in another session of Aspire. And this file is nothing more than a straightforward 3D carve. I have two sheets of material here in this file, both identical pieces of MDF, and I've placed a 3D barn star in the center of each one of these sheets. Now, if you missed the video in which I created this 3D barn star in Aspire, I'll put a link to it in a card up here right about now. These two sheets are virtually identical. I imported the barn star, then drew a vector around the star on one sheet, then I copied them both over to the other sheet. Now, if we go into my Sheets tab, we can see that I have the two sheets here, one titled Machine Bed, the other titled Machine Surface. Now, if I go into the job setup for this sheet, we can see that I have the Z0 position set to the machine bed. If I go into this sheet, we can see in the job setup that I have the Z0 position set to the material surface. When it came time to calculate the toolpaths, I created three identical toolpaths for both of the sheets. This one being for the material surface. I have a 3D roughing toolpath that uses a 1/4 inch 2-flute upcut spiral bit, a 3D finishing toolpath that uses a 1/8 inch tapered ball nose, and a profile cutout toolpath that uses a 1/4 inch 2-flute downcut spiral. For the machine bed, I have identical toolpaths. The only difference between these toolpaths is the toolpaths for this sheet. The Z0 position is set to the machine bed, and for this sheet, the Z0 position is set to the machine surface. I then save my G-code for each one of these sheets in separate folders, then took it outside onto the CNC and started cutting. Outside on the CNC router, the first thing I did, of course, was mount my material. Again, I used tape and CA glue. And I mounted both pieces of MDF to my two different work positions. Okay, I have homed my machine. I've gone through my spindle warm-up procedure, and I'm ready to cut these two barn stars. I have two pieces of MDF mounted here in each one of my work locations. I'm going to start with this one over here. So up here in Mach 4, I'm going to go to Offsets, and I'm going to apply my G55 offset. Then I'm going to come over here, go to Work XY0, and the machine moves over to this corner. Now I'm going to go ahead and mount my first bit, which will be my upcut 2-flute spiral end mill. So I'll go ahead and mount that, get it in the spindle. Then this one I am going to touch off to the material surface. This one over here I'm going to touch off to the machine bed. Mounting the bit and setting Z0 is pretty straightforward. You've seen me do this several times. And then I ran the roughing toolpath. Then it was time for a bit change, and I switched over to my 1/8 inch ball nose and ran the 3D finishing toolpath. Then it was time for another tool change, so I switched to my downcut spiral end mill, set the Z0, and did my profile cutout. It was here that I discovered an issue. The material is slightly thicker than the nominal 3/4 inch. So, after figuring out how thick the material actually was, I had to go back, readjust my Z0 slightly. It was a simple matter of going into incremental jogging, going into MDI, bringing my bit down to Z0, then using incremental jogging to ultimately bring the bit down 20 thousandths of an inch below my Z0, reset the Z0, then go back and rerun that G-code. And as you can see, it cut through the material just fine, leaving that blue painter's tape firmly attached to the spoil board. This is a good demonstration of why it's a good idea to set your Z0 off of the machine bed when you're using a profile toolpath to cut out a part. Now let me change over, go to my G56 offset, set my Z0 to the machine bed, and we'll cut another separate barn star. .3D roughing toolpath went very smoothly, just as you would expect. The 3D finishing toolpath went just as smoothly, and everything is going just as planned. Final bit change to do my profile cutout. And here's where the unexpected happened. On the second barn star, it cut too deep. It cut through that blue tape. So I took both stars off of the spoil board to see what the difference was. And so here are the two stars. Now let's address the elephant in the room first. What happened here? Why did the bit cut deeper over here when I had it set to the machine bed than it did over here where I had it set to the material surface? If I take my calipers and I check the depth of that cut, it's just not quite 0.010 of an inch. And I can check it in various places, and I get the same result. So what happened? Well, what happened was an oversight on my part. It came down to two words: axis calibration. See, after getting my Avid CNC built, in my excitement to go ahead and start using it, I never calibrated my X, Y, or Z axis. So even though I told the controller that this was Z0, it was sending it deeper into the spoil board because the number of pulses going to the motor to send it down to 0 was incorrect. So I had to go in and recalibrate my Z-axis. And after I finished calibrating the Z-axis, I ran another test piece. After calibrating my Z-axis, I then created a test file and set my Z0 to the machine bed, then cleaned up the circle on this piece of scrap MDF, just to make sure it cut to the right depth. So with the test piece run, I can take a look over here and I can see a mark, but I cannot feel an edge. I can see where it is just touch what looks like the first coat of sealer that I applied to my spoil board. Now, human fingertips are pretty sensitive, but let's take a look at the calipers and see what they say. Calipers are reading 0. So I know that that didn't cut down into the spoil board the way it did over here with the barn star. So with the axis calibration addressed, let's get down to the difference between the stars. Now, in a perfect world, they would be identical. But it doesn't take much to see that they're not. Now, with them on this side, it may be difficult to impossible for you to tell which is which. It's easy for me because I know the pieces. I already worked on them. But I can tell you that this one is from the material surface, and this one is from the machine bed. And I can tell that because even though they look the same, this one is actually smaller. And if I flip them over, and superimpose one over the other, we can see that. They're just a little bit different. Well, why is that? Well, it simply comes down to the radius on that tapered ball nose bit. The software calculates where that bit is going to carve based on the cutting surface of that tapered ball nose bit, not the bit total cutting diameter. So when it came down and started carving around here, it was actually in slightly from here. This is why we say when you are 3D carving, or if you are V carving, or if you're pocketing something that has to go down to a specific depth from the surface of that material, set your Z0 to your material surface. If you are cutting all the way through, providing you have your axis calibration set correctly, set your Z0 to the machine bed. Now let me throw that out there. If you have not calibrated your axes on your CNC router, check with your machine manufacturer for instructions on how to do that. If you use a generic CNC controller like Mach 3, Mach 4, UCCNC, or any of the other generic CNC controller softwares, check with their tech support or support forum for instructions on how to calibrate the axes. So those are just a couple of the differences in setting your Z0 to the machine bed versus the material surface. Now this video was meant to be an introduction to the subject. This is not the final word. In the next video, we're going to delve deeper into this. And I'm going to show you how to combine both techniques into one file so that we can do a V carving or a 3D carving while setting Z0 to the material surface to get accurate placement and accurate sizes, then set the Z0 to the machine bed to get an accurate profile cutout, all in the same file. But that's in the next video. We're also going to get a little bit further into this phenomenon of the ball nose bit cutting to not absolutely the perfect size in later videos. Now this is not a phenomenon that is restricted to tapered ball nose bits. It can happen with a standard ball nose bit, with a core box bit, or with a bowl and tray bit, or any other bit that has that kind of a radius in the corner of the cutting surface. And we'll delve into that deeper in a future video. Now I know I breezed through the carving of these stars fairly quickly, and I didn't get very in-depth into using my G55 or G56 work offsets. So I've put links to all of the videos that pertain to those subjects down in the description box of this video, along with a link to the video on how I created that barn star model in Vectric Aspire. Now, I know there's no way I answered every question you're going to have about this topic. As I said, this is just an introduction. So this afternoon at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, I'll be hosting a live Q&A session where you can ask me anything you'd like about anything I've talked about in this video or any of my previous videos. That's this afternoon at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, right here on my YouTube channel, and I've put a link to that live Q&A session down in the description box of this video. Now before we wrap this up, I want to say a special thank you to all of my channel members. Remember, channel members, check the community tab here on my YouTube channel for the link to this Monday's members only live stream. We've got some good stuff coming up. If you would like information on how to become a channel member, just click that little join button down there by the subscribe button. A panel will pop up and a video will play that'll tell you all about channel membership. So I hope to see everybody this afternoon for the live Q&A session. And as always, whether you subscribe to my channel or not, whether you become a channel member or not, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to watch. And y'all take care.